Imagine waking up right now, and there's no phone to check, no clock on the wall, no watch on your wrist, no little number blinking on a microwave. Nothing. How would you know if you're late? How would you know when to eat, when to sleep, when to meet someone, when to run? Here's the wild part: for more than 95% of human history, this wasn't a hypothetical. This was just life. And yet, somehow, ancient humans built empires on schedules. They planted crops on the exact right day. They sailed across open oceans and landed where they meant to. They woke up for war at the precise moment before dawn. They even split the day into hours long before anyone had a clock that ticked. Oh, how did they do it? How do you tell time when time itself doesn't tell you anything? This is the story of humans staring at shadows, stars, water, fire, and their own bodies, and slowly, painstakingly, turning the chaos of existence into something we could actually organize our lives around. This is the story of how ancient humans told time. Before pyramids, before writing, before cities, there was still one thing every single human on Earth had access to: the sky. The sun rises, the sun sets. That's a full cycle a day. Ancient humans didn't just watch the sun rise and set. They watched where it rose, where it set. In summer, the sun rises further northeast. In winter, it shifts southeast, the solstices. If you're a farmer, you need to know when to plant. If you get it wrong, people starve. So they watched, generation after generation. And they built monuments to track it. You've probably heard of Stonehenge. What you're actually looking at is one of the oldest known solar calendars on Earth. Built starting around 3000 BCE, its stones align with the sunrise on the summer solstice. That takes generations of careful observation and enough labor to move stones weighing tons from miles away. Knowing the solstice meant knowing the year, being able to tell your community, spring is coming, hold on a little longer. Stonehenge wasn't alone. In ancient Egypt, structures were aligned with the rising of specific stars. In Peru, the Inca built 13 towers along the horizon near Cusco, so priests could track exactly which day it was. In ancient China, structures and observatories tracked the sun's shadow to determine the solstices. Different continents, different peoples, no contact with each other. Yet they all came to the same conclusion. They weren't primitive. They were patient. Multi-generational science experiments using nothing but rocks and careful memory. But tracking the year solved the what season problem. What about knowing it's midday versus an hour before? This is where the sundial enters the story because it's so simple. Stick a vertical object in the ground. Let the sun hit it. Watch the shadow. As the sun moves, the shadow moves too. Long in the morning, shortest at midday, lengthening again by evening. Ancient Egyptians used this as early as 1500 BCE. A straight base with a raised crossbar, its shadow marking the hour. At noon, they'd flip the device around, since after midday, the sun cast shadows the opposite way. It's such a basic piece of technology, and yet it changed how humans experienced their own day. For the first time, time could be broken into hours. Ever wondered why we divide the day into 24 hours? That traces directly back to ancient Egypt. The Egyptians divided daylight into 12 parts and nighttime into 12 parts, giving 24 total. Why 12? Most historians believe it comes from counting finger joints, 3 segments on each of 4 fingers. But sundials had an obvious, glaring problem. What happens when the sun isn't out? Ancient engineers asked a genius question. Can we simulate the sun's movement using something else? The answer was water, the clepsydra, meaning water thief, because it steals water at a steady rate. Take a container, poke a hole, fill it with water, and mark lines as it drains or fills to track elapsed time. Water clocks appear in ancient Egypt as early as the 14th century BCE, later in Babylon, Greece, China, and Persia. But water drains faster when full, slower as it empties. The earliest versions weren't perfectly accurate. Greek engineers designed cone-shaped or curved containers, compensating for pressure and keeping the flow rate consistent. By 250 BCE in Alexandria, Ctesibius built an advanced water clock with a float, rod, gear, and pointer on a dial. That's more than 2,000 years ago, humans building devices with floats, gears, and dials powered by water, not electricity. In ancient Athens, water clocks timed how long each speaker was allowed to talk during a trial. In ancient China, elaborate water clock towers regulated the schedule of entire imperial cities, ringing bells and drums. Water works great unless it's freezing outside, in which case it turns to ice and stops flowing entirely. So ancient civilizations in colder climates turned to fire. Candle clocks were marked with evenly spaced lines calibrated to burn for a specific length of time. King Alfred the Great reportedly used candle clocks, housed in thin translucent horn cases to shield the flame from wind. In ancient China and Japan, an entirely different fire-based system developed: incense clocks. Some versions had threads holding tiny metal balls above a bell. As incense burned through, the ball dropped with a ding. Some incense clocks doubled as fragrance devices, different scents marking different hours. Time you could literally smell. You've almost certainly seen an hourglass, sand falling from one glass bulb into another. Sand doesn't freeze or expand like water, making hourglasses especially useful on ships, where rocking motion disrupted water clocks. Sailors used hourglasses to help estimate their ship's speed and, in turn, their position at sea. How did ancient humans navigate open water with no land or landmarks at all? The stars. Egyptian priests developed star clocks, using decans stars that rose at different times throughout the night. Polynesian navigators memorized detailed star compasses, navigating thousands of miles of open Pacific from memory alone. The human body itself is a kind of clock, what we now call the circadian rhythm. Ancient humans lived by it, waking near sunrise, feeling drowsy as darkness fell. In many societies, schedules were structured by activities themselves: time to milk the animals, time the fish start biting. Why does an hour have 60 minutes? Why not 100 or 50? For that, we go back to ancient Mesopotamia. The Sumerians and Babylonians used a sexagesimal system, based on the number 60, instead of base 10. 60 is remarkably clever, because it can be evenly divided by so many smaller numbers. This mathematical foundation eventually influenced how time itself came to be divided. 60 minutes, 60 seconds. The sun handled days and years. But what about weeks and months? That's where the moon comes in. The moon's phases follow a reliable cycle, roughly 29.5 days from one full moon to the next. Ancient humans tracked this long before written history, scratching notches into bone to count days between full moons. Many early calendars, Babylonian, Chinese, Jewish, Islamic, were lunar or lunisolar systems. A purely lunar year at about 354 days drifts out of sync with the seasons if left uncorrected. Ancient Egypt moved toward a solar calendar earlier than most, because their agriculture depended on the Nile's flooding cycle. They developed a 365-day calendar, remarkably close to the actual solar year. Why did ancient societies care this much? Because time is one of the most powerful tools a civilization can possess. If you know when to plant, you avoid famine. If you know when the flood begins, you can prepare in advance. Timekeeping is one of the foundational technologies that allowed complex civilization to exist at all. Every sundial, water clock, incense trail, and stone monument represents humans refusing to let time slip past uncontrolled. The 24-hour day, Egyptian. The 60-minute hour, the 60-second minute, Babylonian mathematics. The dial with a rotating pointer first appeared in primitive form in ancient water clocks. The very concept of a calendar, rooted in humans tracking the moon and sun for millennia before writing existed. Every time you glance at your phone to check the time, you're looking at the accumulated legacy of thousands of years of observation. Egyptian priests counting finger joints. Babylonian mathematicians dividing circles into 60 parts. Greek engineers designing cone-shaped water clocks. Chinese craftsmen building incense trails that could ring a bell exactly when needed. Polynesian navigators holding an entire star map inside their memory, passed down through spoken word. None of them had satellites, electricity, or the mathematics we take for granted today. What they had was patience and curiosity. We live in a world of atomic clocks, accurate to a billionth of a second. Yet we're still asking the same questions. The tools went from shadows on stone, to water dripping through a hole, to gears and springs, to vibrating crystals, to cesium atoms. But the underlying human need hasn't changed one bit. We are still the same species that once stood beside a stone pillar, watching a shadow creep across the ground. So next time you glance at your phone and see the time, take half a second to actually think about it. You're witnessing the end result of an unimaginably long chain of human curiosity. If you found this fascinating, let me know which ancient timekeeping method surprised you most. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.